happen, you might find out tonight with some presentations that we're doing. So tonight's topic is, I called it 3 slideshows with the policy position team. So we got all kinds of committees and teams and projects, and the policy position team tries to write some reasonably accessible papers about how monetary reform interacts or is connected to issues like taxation, banking, interest, healthcare, other impacts that it can have on society. And at the same time, we try to give or develop some smaller accessible presentations, online presentations. And that's what we're going to have tonight. So 3 people of that team, Carly Enger, Mark Young, and Paul LeBeau, will do presentations. Carly Enger will do something about kind of an introduction to monetary reform. Then Mark Young will do something on social justice, and then Paul LeBeau will do something on taxation. Before we start, just 2 rules for tonight. During the presentations, we request you not to use the chat because that's a little distractive and not entirely respectful for the presenters. But besides those presentations themselves, type in stack under the chat function that you find at the bottom of your screen. It says chat. If you click on it, there will be a window open. At the bottom of that window, you can put in your, whatever you like to put in there. But if you want to do, contribute to the discussion that we'll have, just put in stack. Before we start, just for the very new people that are here, I see that Mary and Joe and Howard and Susan have joined. Those are old-timers, veterans, very knowledgeable. But I'll call on some new people just to tell something, a little bit about yourself, which you don't have to do. If you don't want to, just say pass, then it will go on to the next one. So let's start with Mark, proper or proper. Hello, Mark. You're muted still. I don't know if he is hearing this. Otherwise, we'll go on with Luciano Di Feo.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
We hear you. Excellent. Yes.
I'm from Argentina. My English is, well, more or less. And I'm interested in the topic because here in Argentina, we are living a catastrophe. So I want to learn, hearing you. Anything that I could help in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes.
So.
We just published a Spanish anthology with papers about monetary reform. Otherwise, I'll ask one of our people to put a link into the chat room.
I got this.
No? You printed it out?
Yeah,
yes.
Printed.
Excellent.
And I was reading, yes, and it's very cool, pretty cool.
Excellent. I'm very glad. I'm very happy about that. Thank you so much, Luciano. Terrell Jackson. Hello, Terrell. Unmute and tell us something about yourself. Welcome. Yeah, we see you and hear you.
Okay. Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Terrell Jackson. I'm an English teacher, and I'm just interested in the topic, so I just wanted to learn more and saw there was a coffee house tonight, so I figured I'd just tune in.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Clark Hummel. Please unmute. Yes, maybe we can see you or not. Go ahead, Clark.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, I guess the first thing I should say is I'm officially enumerate, but I'm also very curious. I kind of see economics as a zero-sum game, and I hope it's not. My biggest, or my priority is to figure out how to tackle the 1% without going at them head on. If we can use the monetary system in a way that meets our needs and not have to directly attack them, then it just makes everything easier. So I really have a lot of incentive to get numerate because the 1% is failing us and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Yes, yes, we go through legislation, not pitchforks. So,
Okay. That sounds good.
yes.
Thank you.
Benjamin, last name I don't see, Stream or Stream.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's my first time here. Happy to be here. I was interested in alternative kind of approaches to economics for a long time. Currently, I work with the public banking kind of initiative in the East Bay in California. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Great. Well, welcome everybody. The rest are all, as I say, veterans or members or board members. Our president is here, Lucille Eckridge. Hello, Lucille.
Hi, maybe Mark Proper is able to introduce himself now.
Okay, let's
Hey,
see.
yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm just calling in for a minute. My microphone's broken. So I've been supporting the NEED Act for close to 3 years now. I sometimes do things in New York City. I've met with Mark Young and Harrison. So I've been involved for quite a while. I'm just trying to plug back in. I've been a little bit quiet on the monetary reform front. So just here to get, back involved a little bit and, get my head straight, see what we're doing next. So.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Thanks for stopping by and joining.
Right.
The last one, Lorinda. Hello, Lorinda.
Hi. I don't know how I found you guys, but anyway, really interested in economics, and I had not been interested in that forever. If I could go back and start over again, I think I would major in economics and maybe art history. So you just keep changing how you think about things. And I have recently read a couple of very good books on basically on economy for the common good type of thing. So, and I would be interested in if you do have if maybe even on your website, if there's a book recommendation list or anything, I would be very interested in reading more. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorinda. Yes, on our website, sorry, we have something of a so-called weighted list of books that were weighted by experts, and they came to something of a consensus of what were the best books. I'll give the specific link to that. I'll put that into the chat. So here we are for the main course tonight. 3 slideshows, and we'll start with Carly Anger, and maybe you give us a little introduction about yourself, and then we'll go off to the races. Carly, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Carly. I am a newer member of the Alliance for Just Money. I live in Chicago. So I was welcomed to this group through Lucille. And I kind of hit the ground running when I first joined. I am very passionate about reforming the money system. And, I think it's necessary for us to advance socially. So that's my passion for being here. And I guess I kind of started this little project, which I'm coining as a social media campaign, where, a lot of the ways that I get my information or am introduced to new topics is through Facebook and Instagram and just social media. Obviously, it's everywhere. It's hard to avoid. Kudos to those who haven't tapped into that. I am not one of those lucky ones. So anyway, so that's kind of my, my dreams is creating slideshows or like infographics that explain money and how our current system is functioning and how we can change it to just money, money that is actually going to help the people. So that is why I'm here today, because I have started slowly but surely. I'm working through these slideshows, but I created one, and I'm wanting some feedback from everybody. Just, do you like the format of it? Do you like the style? Do you think it does an adequate job of getting our message across? So, you know, as I'm sharing my slideshow, if you all can just kind of think of comments and feedback, that would be great. I will take them at the end. But I did just want to mention that my slideshow that I'm about to share with you pretty much comes directly from the Alliance for Just Money's website. So I'm going to link in the chat. I'm sharing the link of the little portion that I took from, and it is titled, "How is Money Created?" So I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me as I transition. Okay, does everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes,
Is it
Yes.
just a slideshow?
they're all of them seen at once.
Okay, perfect. No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't seeing everything else on my screen. Okay, so I'm going to make this bigger. And okay. And everybody can hear me fine. Great.
Yes.
Okay, so how is money created? And obviously there's room for improvement. This is, I feel good about this draft, but I do welcome feedback and can change anything. So this is just the opening slide. How is money created? Money is passed from person to person and place to place as people buy and sell products and services. The US Treasury creates the supply of coin money. And then I also noted that the Treasury also handles the printing of Federal Reserve notes that we use for cash. Most of the money in use in the US and throughout the world is bank account money, numbers that are shifted from one account to another as payments are spent and received. Did you know bank account money is actually created by private banks when they make loans? When a bank makes a loan, they create money that didn't exist before, like this magic wand right here. Just keystrokes. To create money for a loan, the bank creates an asset by drawing up a loan agreement the borrower then signs. They create a liability by entering numbers in a bank account for the corresponding amount of money. The asset represents the value the bank owns. Someone else has promised to pay money in the future. The liability represents value the bank owes. They're promising to provide the account holder with cash or a transfer of funds into another account. The key to this process is that numbers in bank accounts are accepted as money, and a bank is handling both deposit accounts and loans. Any other institution or individual can only lend money if they have existing money, but bank regulations give retail banks an exemption from this rule. Banks are allowed to use a bookkeeping procedure that no other entity can. I'm awfully suspicious. The bank's role as money creator often goes unnoticed, even by many bankers. which that is something that I didn't realize until I started joining these conversations. Incredible as it may seem, this is the legal accepted way for banks to make loans. Banks create the money they lend. As you might imagine, there are serious problems with this method of creating money for an economy. One important factor is that when the borrower pays down the loan principal, the money used to pay the principal is extinguished from the money supply. And until the principal is fully paid off, the borrower continues to pay interest on the loan. So essentially, we are renting the money supply from the banks. Yikes. For more clarification of the current process, you may find these references helpful. MonetaryAlliance.org and then usmoney.us, which are just, our lovely websites that we have. So that is my slideshow. And again, it's just very introductory. It's not meant to overwhelm anyone with money talk. It's, hopefully just something to spark somebody's curiosity. So yeah, that's what I have. I don't know if there's any comments, questions, concerns.
I have one question, Carly, that's not content related, but can you explain how does this go out on social media? I'm not on social media, so I don't know how this happens. Is it all each slide one after the other? Is it all like a link to them together? How does that work? Sending this, doing something with this.
That is a great question, Lucille. So how this would, let's say we're posting it on Facebook. This would come up as almost like a photo album. So you would link it to your, or you would create a post and you would link this slideshow to Facebook, right? And then when you post it, it's like a photo series. So you see each individual slide on its own, but it's in consecutive order. And so on Instagram, the news feed is just images. And so what would happen is you would see the How is Money Created picture first, and then you would just slide and see each screen, kind of like how I just shared it.
One by one.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Are there any other?
Yeah, anybody else wants to give a little feedback or just a question, maybe it's very complicated what she is presenting for some of us.
I'd like to ask a question. Is this process similar to how other countries create money, or is this just very unusual?
This is generally accepted by researchers in this field that this is almost a global way of doing banking. For sure, I know that in Western Europe, in the United States, Canada, almost anywhere else. I'm not sure if there are any exceptions. There might be exceptions. There might be countries that only use dollars. And so maybe banks cannot create loans in the way that they're being made here. But I'd like to hear from anybody else if there are exceptions known in the world of this banking system.
So that's my next question then. Would there be examples of another way of doing this?
Historically, yes. Sparta, Rome, there are other countries, even the United States itself had what we call twice they created sovereign money, where the government itself creates debt-free money and spends it into circulation. And that was during the American Revolution and during the Civil War. And apparently it was very well managed and it had good effects. Some will even say that both events were successfully finished because of that access to sovereign money.
Mary Stack.
Mary, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, this does not speak to Lorinda's question, although I can think of another recent exception of how money was created, and that was how Omar Gaddafi had a big stockpile of gold in his country, and his government issued money, and then they ran into trouble. Well, what I wanted to say to Carly was that I think you've done a really good job of explaining in a way that's easy to follow and easy to understand in this short slideshow. I really congratulate you. And something else I liked a lot was the picture on slide 7. And the other pictures are all kind of, you know, there's no emotional content, but in this one slide, you chose to put a skeptical face. I thought that was pretty good. And there is a misspelling of account on slide 5. I basically, congratulations. I think this could be helpful to a lot of people.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that feedback.
Carly, I was thinking, when you talk about the regulations of banks and that they have to keep a certain reserve in question, maybe you can have a slide that tells a story about the goldsmith in the Middle Ages and how they, so it's a nice little story that people will can easily remember how the money system came out of that. And
Franz,
and then maybe you can use the words of 100% reserves or 10% reserves or fractional reserve system, whatever. But
yeah, I think Franz, that's a really great point. There's so many different avenues that we can go with these slideshows, and there's so much information out there that, you know, we could make a million slideshows. But I think like the purpose for these, for me, is to not front load in people with information, but to just spark their curiosity. That's really the goal with this one. But I think, I know Sue Peters has had her hand raised for a while, and then Mark is on stack. So Sue, if you want to go next.
Sure. Carly, thank you. This is so great. It's very exciting. All that you put together. My only thought was that since this is an introduction to these concepts, which are really quite, put people into states of mind that they haven't been in before. Mm-hmm. You might think about having less words per slide, make it a little simpler so they focus more, that's all. But I loved it. Thank you. Excellent.
Well, thank you, Sue. I think that is a great tip, and it is a very hard piece of advice to follow because it is such an abstract concept that, like there's so much, people just don't think or talk about money. And so I feel like it's so hard to, condense the message, but thank you. I will continue to try.
That's the challenge.
Right. It is. So I'm doing my best, but hopefully, as I get more familiar with this, it'll get easier.
You might want to teach some basic courses at the Alliance for people. That's what I did to learn this stuff. I taught people so I could learn it.
That is really good. Thank you, Sue.
Sure.
Mark Young.
Yeah, a great job, Carly, as usual. I wanted to follow up a little bit on Lorinda's question regarding whether or not other banks and some of the stuff that Govert also responded to. There's international accounting systems that are set up with the financial system. So as Govert kind of led to, yeah, any nation that participates in the financial payment systems has to go by this agreement or a way of creating money. I think the difference is that in most countries, some countries have a central bank that's a actual government agency, not a private bank like ours. So I think that would make a technical difference in how you might define who is creating the money, whether or not it's a commercial bank or the central bank. But if somebody didn't go by these rules and try to just create money, I think you would find that they would quickly have sanctions put on them. Everything from sanctions to war if necessary. But nations as a whole, sovereign nations, are not really allowed to go outside the system. So I just want to add that.
Thank you. Folks, we're mixing a little bit systems of getting questions in. There are people who are just putting a question in the chat. We can try to address those. Then there are people putting stack in the chat. So that's the system. And then we got people raising their hands also in the participants bar. So we're gonna try to give everybody his due.
I'm trying over here.
Carly, you don't have to follow that. I propose that Virginia, who we had assigned a little bit of tasks to keep track of stack, to tell us maybe who might be next to pose a question or make a comment. Is that okay, Virginia?
Lorinda has her hand up in the participants, as does, we took care of Sue.
Yeah, if you raise your hand, you have to go back and unraise it.
Mike is in the stack.
As Mike is next on the stack after Mark. If Lorinda has had her question answered.
I took my hand down.
Okay, all right, then it's Mike.
Thank you. Well done, Carly. Thought that was a very good presentation. You know, it was definitely to the point, and you brought up the critical issues. So again, well done. A few things, I had a few questions, and those were in the chat, but I thought it'd be easier if I brought this to your attention. Was a good way of clarifying the situation in terms of the way that the law is intended to work is bring up the constitutionality, right? So if you bring up the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, Congress, or the people are authorized to create money or coin money. That sort of is directly in countervention to this system, right? And so I think that's a good way for people to sort of frame this in their mind, is that the Constitution doesn't say banks shall create money. It says the people or the government or Congress. So I want to bring that to your attention for a recommendation. The other thing is framing it in terms of a sovereign money system. Because this is, of course, my argument with MMT is that if you have a private banker creating money, then you do not have a sovereign money system, because the sovereign is supposed to be the state. That is the very definition of sovereign money. So framing it in terms of the sovereign money system and the question of who is the sovereign, I think is also a valuable way of explaining it. and then finally, to add on to a few of the additional points about where this system has not, or where this system has been existing previously. Of course, we have the greenback and many other systems like the Reichsmark, unfortunately not such a good example from Nazi Germany, but it was effective. But it may be more helpful to think of, the times that this kind of a system where bankers or private entities could create money did not exist. And the reality is it has always existed in some form. In the early Americas, we had the free banking era. And prior to that, of course, bankers, the goldsmith could create, the notes to represent deposits. And so you always have some kind of private entity creating the money in most cases. And the cases that that happens, we find it's very detrimental to society. And the cases where we have that, for example, not happening, the example again with the greenback shows that it's very positive, and many other examples as well. So yeah, those are my comments. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Luciano, you're next.
Hello. Very nice. I have a question, just one. I arrived to you because I met some people from Positive Money from Spain, and they have some small videos. So I wanted to ask if you are a friend of them, in case of why you don't join forces in these cases for the promoting, because there are similar things, no? And well, that I want to know if you have a good relationship with them, because they did similar things. I think that is good for all countries. I think that's all. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you so much. That was great.
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to respond more directly to that, but from my understanding, I think we do have a pretty good relationship with Positive Money. And I support everybody joining forces, but I will let somebody else respond.
Yeah, maybe the person that's best connected, either Bo Young or Mark Young, who have been active in what is called the International Movement for Monetary Reform, IMMR, which is an organization where organizations like ours can be member. So Positive Money is a member of that. The Spanish group is a member of that. I know the Indian group is a member of that. But anyway, yeah, Bo Young or Mark.
Sure, I can speak to that. So there is an umbrella organization called IMMR, International Movement for Monetary Reform. There's about 30 countries that have organizations like this, like Alliance for Just Money, that are fighting for sovereign money in their nations. And so I used to be a part of the core group of IMMR, and am very well aware that there is a sense of goodwill and of sharing resources and wanting to collaborate with each other. So there is that sentiment, and our group does have a very good relationship with Positive Money. Our situations are different in terms of our government and our banking system, just because of how things are set up here in the United States and Canada and what it's like in the European Union. But the work of the groups, we definitely do communicate with each other and share resources. Thank you, Luciano.
And I like to add to that the IMMR in March will have something of a big Zoom conference. I think on the Saturday and Sunday, with presentations. I don't know the program yet, but that is upcoming. But we'll let you know when you know the specific details come in. We will share that with everybody else. Okay, did we have anything else? Anybody else on stack on this? If not, and I see it's not, I propose that we pass on and go on to.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, Mark Young, but indeed not without saying thank you so much, Carly. That was wonderful. I loved it when the slide said wow, and you said yikes. Maybe you want to change that one.
That's a good point. I can do that.
Over.
Okay. Yes, Lucille.
Just wanted to speak to the question that Luciano suggested too. And if I heard you right, you were suggesting maybe we ask the Positive Money group in Spain, or they may have originated theirs in the UK group, I don't know, about actually our using their video and reusing it, changing it to an American context. And I think that has happened with some groups. And so I think it's a good suggestion that maybe we think about, do we want to ask them? And I don't know if there's a charge involved or not, but it's a good suggestion. And so, you know, maybe the alliance or the committee can think about that.
I just wanted to say briefly, more than a year ago, we had an international social media group. Mark came sometimes, and Positive Money England was the ones spearheading that. And I think Mark and I were just kind of, we weren't really ready to take advantage, but they were basically offering us access to their databases of what worked, what doesn't. They said, you can take our videos and adapt them. They've offered everything. And unless they've changed their mind, now that we've got a more, I think we're ready to take advantage of that.
Cool.
I hear you. Thank you. Okay, are we ready then to go on with Mark Young, who will do something on social justice? Mark, you can share.
Sorry, Hobart, before we get to Mark, can we, Harrison Schultz had a question. When should we look for Carly's slideshow on Facebook or Instagram so we can help share it? Carly?
Yeah, I was actually just going to respond to that in the chat. So at this point, I'm working on a backlog that was recommended at the last coffee house where we talked about this, to have a couple of months of backlog so we can do more scheduled posting. So once that happens, we will definitely send out an SOS to the group to get help sharing and promoting the content.
Great.
All right. If you have any other things, guys, just put it in the chat then, but not now. Let's give our attention to Mark Young.
Okay, how's everybody doing this evening? Hey, I want to say right now out the gate that Carly's presentation looks way better than mine. I mean, it's not even close. I almost don't want to show it. It looks so bad. But Carly's job is to actually make them look good later. But you know, the way she presented it is kind of like I'm gonna feel like this is such a letdown for you guys. Okay, so can everybody see this? Okay. So this was a difficult one, and I won't lie, I struggled with it because I didn't realize social justice, in a sense, is attached to a lot of issues. So it made it, for one, I couldn't really focus on like one or two things. So I just had to kind of throw a bunch of things in that could be affected by social justice. And so that's hence my problem. And so what I really want to know is, I had a couple of things written down here. More ideas on how I can better present what social justice is by subject matter instead of just listing it. Because you have, well, I mean, you'll see the different ones I have on here, but I know it even goes outside of that, and I just didn't know how to necessarily capture it because some of the issues are very, you know, soft issues. It's like there's a social justice movement to get rid of poverty. So that's not as easy to just say, well, you could do this or do that. Now I put some things in here, but then the question becomes, should I really go into those, or am I just kind of labeling it as a solution and not really describing how? So I made it real short. But I think it could be some meat added to it, but I just don't know exactly what that meat is. And so let me go through and you can kind of see, because I'm trying to figure out, should there be a list or should there be more definition to the different issues? So I'm just going to scroll through. So how we prepare for social justice. And then the first thing I said was, well, what is social justice reform? Just so we can kind of get an idea of how broad it can be. So justice in the terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. So there are 4 interrelated principles of social justice: equity, access, participation, and rights. And so what I did was I focused on wealth, opportunities, and privileges and tried to group subject matter under those items, right? And so then I wrote that the definition covers a wide variety of issues of concern to various disenfranchised groups and citizens, from homelessness to prison reform to eliminating poverty. Social justice reform asks the question of how do we make more of a perfect union and address these longstanding issues. Although many issues cannot be solved by simply throwing money at them, the basics of solving these issues involve a lack of investment, and thereby the need to fully fund these ills is the start of solving the problem. So these are kind of standard slides. These were also in the healthcare slide, because I think one of our things was like on some of the subject matter that's kind of, you know, healthcare-ish, to kind of give a brief 2 or 3 slide kind of synopsis of what monetary reform is, so people kind of have a clue what we're talking about. So this is the exact same thing. I may have changed 1 or 2 words. We need to change our current system to monetary reform, define as returning the power of money creation from the private, blah, 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 to Congress. Money reform replaces our current system, which is the result of commercial bank lending, kind of how like Carly was talking about it. Then it's a little bit further definition. So that was in the last one. This was in the last one also. So this
Mark, if I may interrupt, can you give us the text but a little slower, because I lost you a little bit and I cannot exactly read what's on the screen.
Is it too small?
Yeah, you can make, if you can make it bigger, that would be great. But also go slower through it, maybe when.
I didn't want to read to you guys because it was.
You can read, Mark. It's okay, and we can read with you, but we'll understand it better if you go a little slower.
Okay. So let me go back then. So I think I read this. Okay. So the next one was we need to change our current monetary system through monetary reform, defined as returning the power of money creation from the private, profit-driven banking system back to the U.S. Treasury and elected Congress. Money reform replaces our current system of money creation, which is solely the result of commercial bank lending. Instead, money would be created directly by the government without debt as an asset. Some call it sovereign money. We call it just money. So that last little caption was in there because we're trying to narrow the different variations of what money reform is. So some people call it sovereign money, some people call it just money. Some people say money reform, some people say asset money. And so just kind of link them all together and say, we're all talking about the same thing. So that's what this slide is about. Then the next one was, again, kind of the encapsulation of the money reform question and what it is. So just money reform simply gives our government the power to create money as needed through a keystroke, as commercial banks do now, instead of having to borrow or tax to support public good. This power has been used before by our government and is guaranteed through Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Our government gave this power away in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, and solving most of our societal ills involves taking this power back and restoring it to our government and Congress. When we pass legislation for just money reform, a variety of solutions are possible to address our social justice concerns. So like I said, that was a similar slide that was in the healthcare. So then I go into kind of just breaking it down. So just money reforms gives us the ability to tackle the issues of wealth. And so I kind of go back to the first statement. So these are wealth issues. So funding for reparations programs that eliminate the wealth disparity from historical and systematic discrimination, and eliminating poverty through living wages and job guarantees. So, and I don't know if I should put more about what wealth means, like tackling the wealth gap, and addressing those concerns that you see in various movements. I'm not sure, because just saying tackling issues of wealth can be kind of broad because I'm not really mentioning wealth inequality and solving, but I'm not sure if what I have in here is enough. So those are the type of things I want feedback on. Then I go on to the next one. Just money reform gives us the ability to tackle issues of opportunity. So providing funding for prison reform and ex-offender programs to lower recidivism, providing funds for economically disenfranchised neighborhoods, improving schools and infrastructure. And then just money reform gives us the ability to tackle issues of privilege. So funding for police training programs, better psychological evaluations, body cameras, and reforming police departments to better meet citizens' needs. Fully funding housing for the homeless, and ensuring every person has access to safe, decent, and affordable housing. Funding quality of housing and service fund. I'm missing a word in there somewhere, but funding quality housing and services for the disabled. So then I just ended with this slide, which is the same one before. Just money reform makes it possible to address our nation's ongoing social justice issues without causing further division based on historical partisan arguments regarding where the money will come from. So, as I said, it's not as pretty as Carly's, and there are still, I think there's just a lot of other issues that I could touch on, but I didn't know what necessarily the solutions would be. For instance, like social justice has a lot to do with the, I forget all the acronyms, LGBTQ, I know I'm missing something. It's LBGQ stuff. Anyway, I didn't know what to say for like solutions. And so I know those are issues, but it's kind of like, you can't pay to get racism out of society, or you can't pay to get, some things are like, if I didn't know what to say about somebody going through, maybe it's counseling programs or something like that are there. Group homes for people who go through problems, but those types of suggestions. So with that, I can open it up and we can go from there.
Paul, you're first on stack. Paul going once, going twice.
My screen kept disappearing. I had to hit the unmute button that kept dancing around my screen. So to what Mark just mentioned, in terms of how just money reform relates to a whole variety of justice issues, I think some of them may not be directly related, but you have to realize a lot of the injustice that we see is due to our money system. And tackling some of the more direct connections between money and injustice will certainly impact those that may not be so directly related to money. So it's kind of starting the snowball running there, rolling. So I don't think we really have to feel obligated to point to every injustice in society and say, well, monetary reform is going to fix this, and it's going to fix that, and it's going to fix this. But a lot of the reason we're at each other's throats is because of our money system. And once we stop being at each other's throats, I think things will start to fall into place. That's my hope.
Sue, I see you've got your hand up. Is that correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I really appreciate that. One thing that I think planning the video out to an audience that is fairly new to thinking about this connection between social media and the money system would be to take one issue, whether it's healthcare for all or the billionaire club, whatever, and first say simply how the current money system creates something like that, creates where people don't have health care and why, these private insurances, whatever. I don't know enough, and then show, okay, if we change the money system, how it would be different. for the individuals, for the citizens. That kind of detail of one social justice issue might be hard hitting. That's the suggestion.
And let me respond to that one, because I think that's what we're trying to do, because this is just, and that's the issue too, Sue, is that social justice is kind of a umbrella for a whole bunch of issues. But we have a position paper on healthcare. And so we'll have a position paper on some of those other issues that you mentioned. So in something that's supposed to be like 10 slides long, I don't know how easy it is to get into that level of detail unless we have a specific healthcare paper. And so the plan is to have a specific paper on UBI and job guarantees and the positions on those things that I think address in more detail the social justice issues that are kind of under that umbrella. And so this is kind of like, to me, I see it as like an overarching umbrella that, and there's a lot of issues up underneath it. So that, I mean, that's one of the things I struggle with is how specific should I be about a certain issue, or should I just list it as a possibility? Because in the social justice, this marketing tool, the goal is to really be able to send it to social justice reform groups. So groups who are concerned about poverty specifically. Groups like Black Lives Matters, who may be concerned about a specific subject that has to do with police brutality or whatever. People who are trying to do something about homelessness, to say that, this could help your issue, and kind of looping it all under social justice, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm on stack and I'm going to step in quickly, and then it's Ben and Lucille and Paul. And I'm just building, we've got around a lot in our discussion group about different approaches to these policy papers, and wondering, there are some who want to include a lot of potential solutions and say, if we have money reform, we'll be able to pay for all these different options. And we also, though, want an emphasis, both Paul and Sue sort of mentioned this, the idea that we need to explain how money reform creates or exacerbates that problem that we are addressing, making that direct kind of cause and effect between the money system and the issue. So we've got both happening, and it's a matter of emphasis, I think, in our different approaches. Ben, you're on.
Yeah. So overall, good presentation, Mark. I would just say that I echo a little bit of what Sue said. I do understand that social justice is a broad topic generally. So any presentation of it will be wide in scope. But kind of how I perceive that presentation is that each slide kind of just says, okay, there is this problem. Giving more government money to X, Y, and Z could, directing funding, capital, these things will alleviate this problem. And because just money will create more money, it'll solve that problem, which I think is, because, ultimately it gives government an ability to create money without, getting further in debt, having to pay interest on the debt to private banks. But it does seem so broad that, like, because if the purpose of this presentation is to reach out to social justice organizations and make them care about banking reform and the ability of the government to get more seigniorage revenue, I don't know if this slide makes the connection that good enough. It kind of just says, hey, there's this problem. Hey, just money will solve it. But I would just like to see more about the connection, because otherwise I know it might just go in one ear out the other. But overall, I mean, it's a pretty well worded slides. Just my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Lucille.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I think there was good content there, and yeah, you have to start somewhere. And so kudos to you for putting the sacrificial draft out there and thinking it through. And in general, what you're all doing, I think there are many ways to put together, like Carly said, a set of slides, and that what you're demonstrating is sort of modeling for each and every one here. We all could, and probably we all should, take your examples and pick a focus we want to work on and develop a slide set and see how we do and come back another time. So anyhow, that was a general comment. And one specific, I think it's good to have a slide set that is broad on social justice. And like I think Mark was saying, each one of the topics, there might at a later point be a separate one on Black Lives Matters and reparations, a separate one, a topic I don't think I saw in there was gender equity, just around, earning income and wealth in terms of gender equity. And I think that should be mentioned in a slide set on social justice. One piece on the reparations that I think is important around the money question and reparations is not only will just money reform provide the means to achieve reparations. I think many people, not everybody, but many people agree it's justified. So then the question is, well, where the hell does the money come from? But that's not the only thing to me. It's not just that just money reform will make the money possible to actually have it, but it will make it enduring. Reparations, that amount of money, whatever it is, will endure in the pockets of the people who benefit from it and in the circulating economy potentially forever, because it's money, it's not credit that disappears. And if we have reparations today, it would be a political nightmare, one, but two, it would not last. All that money would end up back in the 1%'s hands within very short order. And so it would be for naught. It would politically complicated and it wouldn't stay there. So I think that connection with the money issue should be made on the reparations thing. And maybe the other suggestion, and I'll stop there, maybe it's just a different slide set, but another approach, I think, around the social justice topic is that there are so many issues out there. They all are important, they're all valid. And in our current money system, there's not enough means for addressing all of them. And it is convenient for maintaining the existing money system that we're divided and fighting against each other for crumbs, instead of unifying against this system that it's extracting into a minority of pockets at the expense of the environment, the expense of all income earners and non-income earners, the income that workers don't earn, because the owners of the means of production have to pay the interest on the loans they have. So just that divide and rule aspect that helps to maintain the system as it is. I think if all the different social justice groups were unified around just money reform and realized that's the means for all of them being able to achieve with work, it's not going to happen automatically, but with work for all interests and needs to be served. We don't have to fight over it. But in the system now, it helps to maintain it when our attention is fighting against each other. So anyhow, those were just a few suggestions. I'll stop there. There could be more. It's a huge topic. So thanks for taking it on.
We've got Paul, Mark Proper, and Mike on staff. Maybe, Paul, we could let Mark Proper go ahead of you since he hasn't had a chance. Mark Proper?
Hey, hi, can you hear me, guys?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I think what happens, especially with when you get into monetary reform and social justice, most people think that you're talking directly about economics. And we're not directly talking about economics, we're just talking about an angle of the economic system. And so what happens is that if you deal with anybody who is remotely interested in fixing the economy, you're either dealing with socialists or neoliberals. And I don't think that we have, or one thing I've been thinking about is, what is our counterpoint to the neoliberal idea? And one of the problems with reaching the neoliberals is that they believe that social justice doesn't exist, and everything just can be handled through economic transaction. I think that there's a point to be made there, that if people do have enough money and have access to assets, that yes, they can make better lives for themselves and or keep themselves out of the conditions that create those social injustices. But that's a far cry from the police violence and other things. But also towards that fact, when we're talking about it, we need to talk about how the role of the Fed, especially in 2008, when they bailed the banks out, it was Secretary Paulson at the time who made the decision that they would bail the banks out, but the homeowners would not get any sort of leg up, and that the Fed then starts to exist as a centralized authority who's actually making decisions about who society is going to either favor or treat more fairly than anyone else. And so that I think is one thing that can be brought up in a social justice argument, that, the Fed is deciding that the banks get the money and the banks have all the monetary power, so that they're now controlling society through the gatekeeping of giving out loans and then selling them to you for a profit. Part of also social justice is that we now have the trickle-down theory. That's what our society works out of. Since late 70s, that's the neoliberal idea. That when you seed it with a plan like the NEED Act, what you're doing is that you're seeding the money in through the workers, and then the workers are spending the money from the social projects into the society. And so it reverses the flow of money from a top-down to bottom-up system. And that in turn then gives people more power to not only just have the things they need, but to support the businesses that have the ethical practices that our current system won't reward, except, I don't know, until the last minute. If people can afford greener cars or things with greener technology, and the banks are the ones who are going to give the loans and give the initial capital to the people who are already highly invested in keeping oil in power and not giving to green energies, then they're making the decision of what's in the market for us, and therefore reducing our actual amount of choices in what they call a free market. So those are a couple of ways that I think that we can approach social justice. But I think we also need to start addressing people when we're talking to them, sort of from the perspective of, you've been hit with neoliberal propaganda for 50 years. And that's part of what we have to undo, along with providing an education about how money comes into the system. And that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna let Mark Pash go next because he hasn't spoken, and then I've got Paul, Mike Holden, and Sue on the stack. So Mark Pash.
Yeah, I think I was assigned, I'm working on a paper in inequality and poverty. The poverty experts measure their poverty levels in dollars, which is money, which is our whole background. So I personally like to keep our defending monetary reform on an economic basis, not necessarily that social justice and all the other stuff is valid, but I think if we can defend ourselves in terms of reducing, staying in the economic world, then if it happens to come up, we can defend it on a moral or a justice basis. And I think it solves a lot of the problems. And to Lucille's comment that it all ends up in the 1% anyway, is that's how our system works. And the system doesn't work unless you have redistribution. They call it redistribution, but it's recirculation is a much better word for it. And we didn't have any of that until 1933. And so when that started, you see what happens when we take off, just like they decided to bail out the bankers. But if they decided to bail out and pay off all the mortgages, where does that money end up anyway? It ends up in the banks. And they don't understand this monetary system, even the experts. So I think if we attack poverty and inequality, and they even measure inequality wrong. They're talking the difference between the guy at the bottom and Bill Gates, and that's not going to work. And so we just have to kind of build on what is the average person, what's their quality of their life? Because they're all not going to live in mansions, and they're all not going to be millionaires in this type of open society to where we are right now. And monetary reform solves all that stuff. Believe it or not, it really does. And so I like to keep our argument really headstrong into economics. And you can add a little bit of the justice later. But I want to keep it, because when we defeat it on economics, then everybody starts listening. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Mark.
So,
Paul.
We still have another presentation. So if at this moment we can keep it short, whoever is still on, Mike and Sue, so we can go on with Paul, because he still has something to say and present.
Right. So this kind of leads in actually to what I'm saying a little bit. Lucille's comment was, wow. I mean, I had not thought about that in terms of the enduring nature of money in terms of reparations, because I've struggled over reparations for that reason, that it's kind of a false prize in our current system. And Mark Proper's comments, wow, I'm glad we're recording this, because it really, for me, raised some concepts that I had not thought of in terms of our connection with justice issues. It's a little difficult. We are an advocacy organization, and we are an alliance. So we're trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. I agree with Mark Pash that our focus really has to be on the economics, and we have to nail it. And there aren't many people out there who are really nailing it, and we have to be able to really understand that. And so we can be prepared to explain it to people who are going to challenge us. But at the same time, we have to do the outreach to the people who don't understand how just money would affect their particular causes. And we're not experts on any of these causes. We're kind of armchair experts. We can do the research if we want, but the question, the answer, or the retort that I always get is, how are you going to pay for it? And that's all people seem to care about. And that's one answer that we have, at least we have a partial answer to. So, and that's something when we get to my little presentation, we'll explore one little aspect of that. So thank you very much for those comments. Really, for me, very valuable.
Mike Holden?
Yes, so I think everybody's comments were right on. I do appreciate all of those words and thoughts. And my contribution to this, I wanted to say that I think that there may be a common thread. Obviously, there are so many different kinds of social justice initiatives, but there may be a common thread. And I think most people have sort of have brought it up as well, is that the private creation of money, allowing money to be created by private individuals, allows for the siphoning of wealth upwards, meaning taking money away from the people and taking agency away from the people as well in terms of what kinds of projects get funded. And so I think that that's one of the fundamental underlying ways in which the monetary system, the way that the monetary system works, affects any kind of movement for social justice, is by allowing the upward concentration of wealth. And I believe someone said earlier today, the 1% is not, treating us well. That's correct, but I would say it's worse that they are exploiting everyone else. This is a class war. There is a class war, and there always has been. The upper class has always been waging a war on the working class, and it's proven in the statistics. And they don't want people thinking in those terms, because when they realize that the systems are designed to siphon wealth upwards, and I've always found it kind of ridiculous that this trickle down economics got people believing that upward siphoning of wealth is a good thing. The exploitative nature of the system, I think, is that common thread. So anyways, that's my contribution.
So Sue, can you make one quick comment, and then let's give Mark Young an opportunity to respond to the feedback before we move on to the next segment. I do see Harrison is also on the stack, but yeah. Anyway, Sue.
Okay, hold on. I'm just having a little trouble. Okay, I got out of it. Okay. I had a thought that I want to put to everybody about this. This is really important, this whole social justice thing. And it has to do with all of us putting out the message and telling people, if you're involved in a grassroots group that's trying to change something in this country, here is your opportunity to connect what's going on with your concern, your group's concern with money. And I'll just give you an example. I'm in a 5G group here in New York who's trying to inform people about the detrimental health effects of 5G, because they're putting 12,000 antennas on the corners in New York City in 5 boroughs. And so I got involved. I'm doing my part. One of the leaders, I had a conversation with her, and I pointed out that Comcast, one of the major cable companies that's pushing 5G, is in one of the most indebted companies in the United States, indebted mostly to JP Morgan Chase. And when she learned about the secret of the money system, she said to me, "Oh, you have to come and talk to our group. This is important." So we have to connect these social issues to what we're involved with, the groups, and connect it in that way with our involvement. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Harrison, can you make it really quick, and so we can move on to the next segment? but I want to get you.
Yeah, I'll keep it real quick. It probably doesn't even need to be said, but it's just really, I think it's really important. Social justice is just a really broad issue, of course. And so, I mean, for purposes of digital outreach, I think it's just really important to pick one issue at a time when we know an issue is probably going to become relevant. So, I mean, like, we know tax day is coming up. So, like, knowing how to tie a social media campaign together to a certain issue, like, hey, are you sick of taxes? Here's what monetary reform has to do about that. Then we start calling the shots a little bit more. We kind of pick when we want to talk about which issue, start thinking more in terms of campaigns, in terms of how we produce our social media, our Instagram and content like that. I would like to see more campaigning personally with regards to digital outreach, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay.
Virginia, Franz is on Stack.
Okay, he's not on my stack, but I'll take your word
Yeah,
for it.
I didn't see it either, but hold on, guys. We're running out of minutes, and I thought Harrison's thing about taxation would be the perfect segue into Paul's item. And I know that Lucille proposed to have still Mark give some comments on what was done, but I propose to keep that then for after Paul's presentation. So I propose we go on with that, and then whatever is left we can discuss. So
do it.
All right. So next segment is then Paul LeBeau.
Okay.
On taxation, and maybe we can do something that will be ready before April 15th, when a lot of people will have very strange tax structures or pictures because of the crazy year of 2020.
All right.
Paul, the floor is yours.
Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Even better.
All right. Okay. All right. So I'm Paul LeBeau. I'm one of the founding members of the Alliance. I sit on the board as the vice chair. Let me see if I can move this little window out of the way. So what this is me thinking out loud. I have been interacting lately with a lot of progressive people, socialists, Marxists, things like that. And our message is not very convincing. I realize that I need to learn a little bit more about certain aspects of monetary reform, just in terms of what the implications and ramifications are going to be. One of the things about just money reform is that it's never really been tried extensively. So there's not a heck of a lot of economic research out there. And the way we're set up, we have multiple committees here. We have a outreach committee for communications and website development. And then we have a research and policy committee, which is just starting to crank up now. And we're all very much on board with the imperative for just money reform. But I found that there's still some disagreements, misunderstandings, different emphasis among us that I would like to hash out as we go along. And one of the topics that came up, which I thought was kind of, well, everybody kind of agrees on the impact of money reform on taxation and where taxation fits into the whole picture. I found this not to be true, that we do have different ideas and opinions on it. So what I'm trying to do right here is really not to come to any conclusion, and it's kind of very elementary, but just to lay some things on the table so that we're at least looking at the same picture of what the role of taxes are now in our economy and with the government. So the good news is that just money reform does remove any objections to government spending based on debt ceilings and the need to pay interest, because they go away. So people can't say we can't do that for those reasons. But that still leaves taxation and then sovereign money creation left to pay the bills, right? So it gets rid of some of these political roadblocks and obstacles, but then we have to deal with what we have. And I just started looking at some of the statistics that in the past my eyes would kind of glaze over at, but now I'm taking a little closer look. For instance, yearly borrowing only makes up actually less than a quarter of spending. So when we talk about, well, we're going to get rid of borrowing, it's important for many reasons, but it's not the end all and be all for solving our problems on how much we can spend. And it turns out that taxes support by far the greatest percentage of money spent by government. And one of the questions that comes up is, can taxes actually be reduced or even eliminated under sovereign money reform? I don't know the answer. Some people say absolutely, and some people say absolutely not. So, and some of it comes with how we look at taxes. You know, what are our personal opinions about tax? Should it be considered a burden, or is it an investment? Is it something we just want to get rid of as quickly as we can, as thoroughly as we can, or is it something that we want to include as part of being a citizen? And then what are the assumptions that go into choosing our level of taxation? These are some ideas that I've just been thinking about, and I don't have answers. So that's the spoiler. Let's see if I can go to the next one. Oh, it's not letting me go to the next one. Let's see. There it goes. All right. So here's one of the pie charts that my eyes always glaze over at, but it's something that we really have to face squarely. And again, taxes fund the lion's share of this spending. And you'll notice that entitlements take up a huge percentage of what we spend our money on. Interest, that little green wedge up there, and this is the thing we complain about a lot, that some of our tax money goes to, it's significant, but it's only $0.3 trillion compared to $4.4 trillion for the whole budget. Even the Defense Department, where progressives like me like to point out that if we just get rid of the defense spending, that's going to solve all our problems. Well, you can see it ain't. It's going to make a big dent, but it's not the solution. It's more complicated than that. So the question is, that red pie there, how much do we feel that needs to be increased? Me, as a progressive social democrat, I think it should be doubled or tripled. I think we're way underspending on things like entitlements. I wouldn't call them entitlements anymore, but just in terms of the social needs that we don't have now. But can we do it? So
can you define what you mean by entitlements there?
Yes, I'm going to do that in the next slide, in the next couple of slides, but let me just elaborate a little bit. Again, the current system, where we are now, spending is about $4.1 trillion for 2019. And I'm choosing 2019 because that's a typical year. It's not what we're going through now. Taxes make $3.3 trillion of that. And we only borrow $8 trillion. And then when we talk about bank money creation, banks are creating during that time period about $0.9 trillion of money. So just keep that in mind in terms of money flowing out and then money that's entering the economy. So again, how big do we want this to be? And should it be increased at all, this entitlements pie? And that's, for me, a big question. And again, new money, this 0.9 trillion, equals less than a quarter of the amount of money that we spend each year. So here's, and to Lucille's question, this is what entitlement mandatory spending consists of. Big bulk is Social Security, Medicare, income security. I guess that's to support unemployment payments, Medicaid, veteran benefits, and others. So this is very important stuff, and we all know it's way, way underfunded. At least I believe it is. So what does money do? It takes money out from the population, government collects it, and then it spits it right out again. It recirculates right back into the economy. No new money is added to the process of taxation. It's ostensibly, on the surface, it's inflation neutral. We're not, if you believe in the quantity theory of money, which is something that has been refined and contested, but it's true to a certain extent. It's not going to affect inflation at all because we're not really adding money by taxing and then spending. And this is one of the goals of the Need Act in terms of what the monetary authority looks at to determine whether or not the quantity of money that is created under a sovereign money system is causing trouble in the economy by increasing inflation. So this is the way the system is now. Now, some people say, tax the rich. And that's what all my progressive friends say. Forget this monetary reform stuff. I have an uncle who looks like this guy, but I wish he was rich. So same thing applies though. What's happening here though is that X dollars goes out, X dollars comes in, and what's happening is circulation and redistribution. That's what Mark Pash was referring to. And again, this is on the surface neutral as far as inflation. We're not creating any more money. But I was reading some reports by some economists at the Fed, and they were saying that because the wealthy don't spend much in the economy, taking money from them and putting that money in the real economy could have some effects on inflation. They don't go as far as saying what that effect would be, but it's just something to think about, because suddenly money becomes more hot. It becomes more usable in the economy, as opposed to the way it's now being used in speculative investment in the stock market. So just again, a little bit more perspective. This is from the Federal Reserve. And this is just showing how much new money was created in 1 year, from the beginning of 2019 to the end of 2019. And it comes out to $0.9 trillion. And that's the number that I had on my first slide. Now, if you look here, we all know what this is. This is the pandemic. And there's a huge amount of money that got pumped into the economy here. And it's very tempting to say, well, look at all that money that the economy absorbed. No inflation. In fact, we may even have some deflation here. So we can just go ahead and crank as much money as we want in the economy, no problem. Well, let's find out why. This is the velocity of money. It's essentially the rate of spending, the rate at which money changes hands. And historically, if you can follow this curve back, here's 2016, back to 1995, it's been slowly decreasing. Money has been changing hands more and more slowly in the economy. And as the economists at the Fed said, this is due to wealth concentration. When money gets hoarded by the wealthy, it's no longer available for the rest of us to spend. So the velocity of money has been slowly until boom, we hit the pandemic and money just stops changing hands. Stores are closed, people are not buying things, factories are closed. So of course, we need a huge infusion of money to make up for the fact that money's not changing hands. So my lesson from this is that we have to be careful using these very unusual circumstances to make the case for injecting just sovereign money into the system. We have to do it in a much more smart manner. And this, it's just through this, here's the GDP, just took a dive in 2020. So it's a very unusual circumstance. So here, what I have is just some examples. Once we switch to sovereign money, what are some of the options that we may want to consider? And I just chose a few simple ones. So under monetary reform, first of all, you have to realize some things are going to change. we're not spending some of our hard-earned tax money on interest anymore. We're going to have an extra $0.3 trillion to fool around with that we didn't have before because it's not going to interest. But we're not borrowing anymore. So our budget is actually being deprived of $0.8 trillion in money that we borrowed. So we have to kind of take that into account. That's a difference of like $0.4 trillion or something like that. We'll see. So currently, this is our current situation, no sovereign money. Our non-interest spending is $3.8 trillion. And so I just took out the money that we're spending on interest. We're getting, in terms of revenues, $3.3 trillion. That's most of our money comes from taxes. And we're only borrowing $0.8 trillion. And money being created by banks is $0.9 trillion. So you can see, compared to the, again, I'm just looking at compared to our actual spending budget, these are significant, but the amount that we actually spend kind of dwarfs each of these categories. So just to make things a little less cluttered, I'm adding one line at a time. So say we switch to monetary reform. We keep spending exactly the same, $3.8 trillion. We can lower taxes because of this fact up here that we're not paying interest, and we can create money now. The money that before banks were creating over here, this is sovereign money created. So we can use that money to actually offset taxes. So if we keep spending the same and create the same amount of money that banks are creating, we can actually reduce our tax burden from 3.3 trillion to 2.9, and that's pretty impressive. So take this case here. We keep the spending, but we say, hey, we just want to get rid of taxes altogether. So we're going to keep our spending at 3.8 trillion, just like now, but we're going to get rid of taxes. And since we can't borrow anymore, and there's no more bank money, that means we have to create $3.8 trillion of new sovereign money and dump that into the economy. And so this gave me some pause. I mean, can we do this? A lot of us argue that yes, we can, and some of us say, I don't think so. So again, this is just to give us some perspective. Another example, let's double the spending, like I think we need to do, and but keep the same tax as initially when we first switched to monetary reform. That leads to us needing to create $4.7 trillion of new money. And the question is, and again, I don't know the answer, can the economy sustain that much new money without causing inflation? And then finally, say we want to double the amount of spending, but keep the same new money because we don't want to cause inflation, and we think we need to create any more money than we're already creating, then that's going to cause inflation. So let's be safe. That means that we're going to have to raise our taxes from $2.9 trillion all the way up to $6.7 trillion. That's not an easy sell to people. So again, I'm putting these out, just food for thought. I don't have the answers. Joe might have answers. He's sitting there very quietly and patiently. But it's something that, again, when we're making our case to the public, we have to be careful what we're promising. So here's an example, the way I look at taxation. Actually, initially, I felt that through sovereign money reform, we could actually eliminate taxation. And I think Lucille said something about 6 months ago that kind of made me think. And I kind of realized I don't think that's possible. And I don't think it's even desirable from a social standpoint. So, and again, this is my opinion. And we have has some very heated discussions over this. But as an example, who pays for our hospital? You know, buying a hospital is not like an individual act like buying a house or a car or a TV. It requires a group purchase. But the decision then is who pays for this? Under sovereign money, we can say, well, just print the money. Nobody pays for it. Free money. And we could say, okay, there's an opportunity cost. That printed money could have been used for something else, but that's just a priority decision that we have to make. And again, the question is, can the economy stand that extra money? And if it's deemed, if the monetary authority or whoever makes the decision says no, then we don't get a hospital. Okay. We could say taxes pay for it. In other words, we as individuals pool our resources, and effectively the citizen owns a share in the hospital. You know, individuals may need to forego some individual private purchases, and it may not actually be affordable for citizens. And so again, no hospital. So I believe that there's going to have to be actually a mix of money and taxes. And it's kind of up to us to kind of tease that out over the years, because it's not an easy analysis to make. And so I want to just leave you with these questions to consider. Is eliminating taxes optimum? Is it fair? Is there a trade-off between tax reduction and our needed services? Or do we just get the services we need and reduce taxes and let the chips fall where they may? And how will taxing the rich impact inflation? Again, as I mentioned before, the rich hoard large amounts of money that doesn't really contribute to inflation. And it's a real question that if we just tax the rich, that if we believe that the quantity of money does impact inflation, it's just something to think about. It's kind of in the weeds, but again, it's something I really haven't heard except from some of these economic working papers from the Fed. And how flexible does tax policy really need to be? You know, as incomes improve under just money reform, should taxes actually increase on the middle class? So there has to be some kind of policy that's not just fixed in time, but is flexible and adjustable. How that will be is something that economists really have to work out. And for me, this has been a real major sticking point for making the case to neoliberals and even progressives about money reform, is who influences and makes decisions on tax level. Is it Congress? Is it the monetary authority? It's probably going to be both, but people are very, very wary of having some centralized body making decisions on money creation. And so this again is just something we as advocates have to think about. And I'll leave it at that and open up the floor.
Virginia, did anybody raise their hand or got to a stack? If not, I know who wants to say something, and that's Virginia herself. Go ahead and unmute.
She's speechless.
Yeah, no, Paul, I thought you did a really good job of the questions that we need to be asking, raising them and organizing them so that it made sense. I thought that was great. Your numbers don't match those in the U.S. government's financial report. You know, I mean, the points are probably still valid, but the numbers are not accurate.
Well, the chart from the Fed was right there, so.
Well, the Fed doesn't produce the U.S. government's financial report. That is produced by the Department of the Treasury, and I put a link in the notes. Anyway.
But we all know who's running the show, right?
Well, no, lots of people don't know that the government does actually produce a.
I'm kidding. Yeah, it's only meant to be approximate.
Oh, I like numbers that are really, and so do you. That are actually accurate. That was my only comment. But I thought that you did a great job of raising all the questions, and that's really wherever we should always start, is with the questions. So that was great.
I got Mark on stack, and then I'll let you take it over again, Virginia. Mark, go ahead. Mark Young.
Mark Young.
As Paul indicated, yeah, this was a subject of probably a couple of hundred comments and stuff back and forth on this particular particular subject matter. Probably mostly between me and Paul. So I'll speak on it in two ways. I appreciate the information and the fact that it almost seems like this is a setup for more of a paper than, I would say, a presentation to common people who may not understand it. It seemed a little detailed and trying to follow the charts and everything. I understood what you were doing, but my fear would be that if we put that out through Instagram, I'm not sure people could really,
Absolutely.
it doesn't grab anything.
Yeah.
So, but I thought that's what we were doing. So that's why.
No.
But as a response to the meat of the argument, just to let people know what my argument or my pushback was with Paul, I'm just going to read something that I had posted. It's pretty quick as a response to it. But in short, it doesn't, I don't think the numbers account for productive capacity and excess productive capacity. I think that a lot of this stuff involves monetary theory. And if we're creating nearly the same amount of money, but just not borrowing any, and we go with the 3.9, then to me, that tells me that there's not really any extra money to spend for anything. If we're saying is we're going to create an extra $1 trillion a year, that's going to be argued over. So we can't fund anything we're talking about, really. That would leave the same partisan arguments in place. And to me, that's not why I'm involved with monetary reform. I think monetary reform really has the ability to really change the narrative so that we're not arguing over money in Congress and we're just arguing over what the best solution is. So that's one thing, but I just wanted to say this. So as an example, based on your assumption of 3.9 in taxes currently collected by the government, the following will be true in the United States. 3.9 trillion in taxes is $11,300 per person based on a population estimate of 350 million people. The average of 26,000 in tax relief could be made with that same amount of money, 3.9, considering a 150 million workforce. And creating $7 trillion in sovereign money is $20,000 per person in 350 million people. So the figures I just said would leave 3.1 trillion for new spending and 3.9 trillion to cover getting rid of taxes. And so that 7 trillion again is $20,000 per person in the United States. It's not really a lot of money. And I don't think it could, if it's spread around from the ground up, kind of, as somebody just mentioned, the effects on inflation are, in my mind, are moot because it's not coming from the top getting poured into a particular sector like housing or something like that. And so when it benefits everybody, it's a different calculation. So if all this new sovereign money was going into the same industrial sectors, inflation could be an issue, but it's going into an economy that currently doesn't exist with unemployed and underemployed workers and additionally under new economic growth. So the productive capacity argument, which we agreed on, is not really being looked at all. So that was kind of, and it's more, but I won't get into it. I'll let other people talk. But my point is that it's not that I don't believe in taxation, but I think that the taxation theory should be rethought and re-garnered. So of the pie chart that Paul put up, if it was up to me, I would say taxation would be for the military spending and to pay for representative government. Anything else outside of that, you have to look at productive capacity and see how much you can add. You just can't take static numbers and assume there won't be any economic growth and that the private sector can't absorb money. There are so many people in here who are under poverty in this country that simply giving them an extra $10,000, $20,000 in wealth that's going to be spent around them in parks and infrastructure and everything else, you can't assume that's going to cause inflation and that it can't be supported. So that was my argument. I know we're running out of time, so I'll leave it alone.
We've got 5 people on staff. I've got Sue, Lucille, Mark Pash, Mike, and Franz. And since Franz hasn't had a chance to talk at all yet, Franz, why don't you go ahead and go now? Are you there, Franz?
He needs to unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah, I was starting to think and connect Paul's presentation to Mark's presentation. Because if you talk about monetary justice, you really touch on anything that money impacts. And so when you have the new monetary system, then the allocation of the money to, the allocation of taxes will be to promote more equality or less inequality. And so basically the rich people and organizations will be taxed. So now the question is, how can that be done justly? And so Paul raised the question of this can be done either by a monetary authority or Congress. I think the main answer there would be that it would be done in a participatory or democratic way. And so coming back to Mark's presentation, the organization's name is Alliance for Just Money. And when people hear this, they may say, no, what is just money? Then we ought to be ready to say monetary justice is this and that. And so when you talk about monetary justice, then first of all, one can argue it is an essential part of social justice. And any kind of other justice, like gender justice, economic justice, legal justice, fiscal justice. And so monetary justice is to be part of a whole set of justices and injustices. And so I gave a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation for the International Peace Research Association, of which I have been a member for years. And for them, dealing with peace, most people were thinking about social peace and ecological peace. But for people to start thinking about monetary peace, that is a concept that is quite different. And so I think it's very important that the organization really starts circulating a kind of discussion paper, because these little presentations, of course, you can say they are for the website, but a simple presentation is in essence not so simple, because it has to be the product of a complicated discussion, so that complicated matters are simplified, and then one can make a proper presentation. So what I hope is that Paul's presentation is going to be circulated, because one really has to think about it. There are many questions, and there may be some answers available. And then secondly, I hope that we can set up a study stack of monetary justice, and not only call it social justice. Social justice is a combination of so many different justices. And so if you talk about economic justice, then basically fiscal justice and also monetary justice are part of it. And so I think one has to place monetary justice by itself as part of a whole set of justices. Thank you.
So we've only got 4 more minutes, and we've got Sue, Lucille, Mark Cash, and Mike. I'm going to let Hobart decide what to do.
Well, the next proposal is that officially we will finish at 9 o'clock. So just before exactly 9 o'clock, I will give this an official finish. But then, you know, we can stay on for another 15 or 20 minutes if you want to keep discussing this. So let's have 1 or 2 persons still posing questions, and then just before 9, I will jump in, telling something about future coffee houses. So Virginia, back to you again.
Well, Sue is next.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Paul, I just need the sources that you use to say that taxes support by far the greatest percentage of money spent by the US Treasury, because that was very surprising to me.
Me too. I mean, these were, I just chose the nicest, clearest pie chart from the Fed that I could find. And so you saw the numbers. I think Virginia feels they're completely wrong. I don't know. So I'd like to see another pie chart with the correct numbers. So
Well, could you share that with our group here?
sure, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
I also shared the link to the US government's financial report, which is available at the Treasury. But if you type in US government financial report, it'll pop right up.
Right. Well, the thing is, a financial report is just cluttered with numbers, and I just wanted to show the general numbers for this presentation. So it's confusing enough.
If you can share them with us, that would be great. Your sources. Good, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, to jump in here, we'll make a study stack again of this presentation. It might be structured a little more complexly, but we'll give it a try. Back to you again, Virginia.
Lucille.
I could let Mark Pash go first if he wants to.
Okay, Mark. I'm eating my dinner, so it's only 7 o'clock. Anyway, so I think when we should never, ever, ever say we'll eliminate taxes. I mean, we want to, first of all, it's a big negative. And second of all, we want to promote monetary reform. I just use the word reduce taxes. And then remember, when you eliminate the money creation from the banks, the big corporations, the big mortgages, the mortgage, those goes away. So all the new money can be redistributed to the way Congress wants. And once it's out there, it goes back into the financial system because people use banks or fintech. So, and then when you look at the configuration of the tax, when you group it that big, less than half of the people pay income tax. I don't know if you know that. It's 40 some odd percent, I think. And the bulk of the average person pays payroll taxes. So for instance, Medicare is not Medicare, but Social Security right now, although it's going to be in deficit, is really paid by Social Security tax. It's almost a break even. Medicare receives its direct taxes too, which I pay. And if you're not working or retired or a trust fund baby, you don't pay any payroll taxes. So this has been a long debate, but if we're going to discuss taxes, we need to bring those in. And estate taxes are very important because you can see with Victorian England and prior centuries, and with us in the Industrial Revolution, what happens if you have no recirculation? You have 4,500 families own everything. You could see it in El Salvador, where 17 families own, or 19 families, whatever it is, own 99% or 98%. Everybody trying to leave Central America. Colombia, 8 families own most of it, and without some sort of recirculation system. But and which is my book is it's important in where the money is going, and a well-diversified distribution of new money and tax money is very, very important. And when it goes to the bottom and they get it every year, like in universal income or healthcare or education, it's going to go to the wealthy. We got to take it back, and we take it back through some of it back through taxation. As you can see, even where the taxes are today, the wealthier are getting wealthier. So we don't even take them, you know. And so when you tax somebody, let's say that makes two people that make $50,000, and you tax them $10,000 or $20,000 or whatever the number is, it's far significant than when you tax Bill Gates $5 billion, he could care less. But when you take a $10,000 away from somebody making 50,000 or 100,000, it's traumatic. And so that's where the tax system breaks down. And I was been a tax consultant my entire career. It's our number one thing as a certified financial planner. And the wealthy people, they don't play the tax game because we're taxing the wage people that get a W-2 have always been at a disadvantage. A self-employed real estate person is still getting all the advantages. And then also the way we tax our capital, which comes out with Piketty's thing, is we're taxing it at much less. It's difficult to tax it higher. And so there's a lot of configuration, but I would say we just keep it general. Oh, we're going to lower some taxes. We can never lower the taxes on the 1%. It's disastrous because that's where the money's going back when they spend it during that velocity. So,
Mark, I'm going to jump in here. Okay, wow, good timing. It's 1 or 2 minutes past 9, so officially this session is over. But who wants to stay can stay still a little bit. Just want to say that a lot of things, books, items, ideas that we discussed, we'll try to put it again into a study stack that we will share through the MailChimp email. Usually it takes a couple of days to put that together. We'll have to see if we make this recording publicly available or not. We'll see about that. Anybody new here, I invite them to contemplate membership of our organization. For a lifetime membership, it's only $20. You pay a little more if you also want to become a voting member and have a say-so in the more official part of this organization. But even if you're just a life member and you want to get active, we got a lot of committees going that make these, you know, write little reports, that make some presentations, do some research, doing outreach to members. So you're most welcome to join us and let us know what are your skills and what you'd like to do maybe. Regarding future coffee houses, I have a Marxist professor kind of maybe coming. His name is Professor Richard Wolff. In very left-wing circles, he is quite known. Paul LeBeau knows him. We're going sometimes to these Zoom meetings where he might show up or his wife might show up. So he might be somewhere down the line on a coffee house, so we'll let you know. We'll also have Joe Bongiovanni doing a coffee house on central bank digital cash. The timing of the coffee houses all depend a little bit on this gig with Professor Wolff. But for sure, Monday, February 22nd and March 22nd, we will have coffee houses again. And we will announce the content in our newsletter, which will come out around the 15th of February. So that's it for me. In general comments, I think I thank everybody, especially, of course, the presenters, Carly Enger and Paul LeBeau and Mark Young for their presentations. Let's stop the recording and let's keep going at it. And I give the floor back to Virginia to organize it.
Lucille.
Okay, I don't know if this get in the recording, but I really want to commend the CWC team who has done the work behind this. I know it's a ton more than what we saw, so thank you all. And just a few comments specifically to Paul. Yeah, it was really interesting presentation. So I encourage you to keep working at it. I think the graphics, not just the pie chart, but the other graphics were great. I like them. Keep them in there. Figure out with Virginia if you got the right numbers or you're looking at some, you need to use different numbers that will make some difference. Then I just have some specific points. A couple are little and maybe a couple bigger. But one, like you talked about, at one point you said that after a money reform, the only money government would have is either from taxes or sovereign money. I would also throw in there fees. Might be small, but particularly at the local level, I mean, fees are important, water and trash disposal, those are governmental services that are supposed to pay their own bills. And there are probably some like that at the federal level. So that's a little item in there. A bigger or something I think you also need in your pie chart that I don't see there. That's why I asked the question, somebody else did too, about what you mean by entitlements, how you were defining it. But I think the big area, and a lot of it is at state level, not federal level. But as we know from the NEED Act, some of the money there is just a straight pass through to the state municipal governments. But the big it's not only state, it's also national. So that big category is just the public good or the social or public good. And I didn't see that in the pie chart. And, national parks and, carbon reduction. And, there's so many things that would go in there. So anyhow, that broad category and thinking about what it contains. One point you said, about that we won't have interest payments. And I think eventually we won't, but I think there's this transition period, as I understand, where as treasury bonds come due, they will be paid. And before they come due, the interest will be paid on those bonds. And so, yes, we can create sovereign money to do that, to pay that, but something has to be paid for those unless we're violating those contracts. So just factoring that in. And the other thing that didn't seem quite to ring right was like when you were debating the questions, and I really, if I didn't say this before, I also echo what Virginia said in the beginning. I like your questions. I like the raising of questions about this. I think you're right on in doing that. And there probably are some that left out. But what I was going to say didn't quite ring right, it seemed, was that when you said, well, if we decide to have no new taxes, then that amount that we were getting and spending from taxes would have to be created by sovereign money. And that seems to be like true at a one point in time. But then, the next year, that money would then be recirculating in the economy. And so then it seems for paying, that public good activity, there would have to be taxes. So something there didn't quite ring right. So think about that. And I think I had two other points. And I was thrilled. Mark actually Young said one of them, well, or half of it, but just that around the question of do we need or not need taxes, I've often thought of it, yes, we need some taxes for the checks and balances on the salaries of the representatives, the people we elect to represent us, and their expense accounts, that is where taxpayers, citizens, electing them to serve us, we should be responsible for, making sure they get paid well enough and not too much. And so it seems just for
Let me know when you're
however
ready
we
to watch.
define the inner work of government, that is, you know, and really it's narrowly defined, just, you know, keeping the lights on, the buildings well maintained, you know, something for capital expenditures over time. But, and then Mark, the other thing Mark said that we would need it for is military, and hopefully, you know, maybe that's defined more broadly as defense, and maybe cybersecurity is in there, but definitely the war part and the guns part of military over time, that can become less and less, even if it's not going to be nothing. I would like to say we get enough women in elected office and it will get down to nothing, but maybe not. But anyhow, I think the representative government is an argument to keep some taxes. And then the last point, and it's, I don't know if tax is the right word there, but the use of this secondary purpose of taxation for as monetary policy, you know, and that is a means for when, if and when we get to the point in time that to keep the purchasing power of money stable over time, we need to remove some money in circulation. And one way is then government borrowing it out of circulation just to keep it out, just keep prices stable, or government taxing it out of circulation. And you know, maybe a sideways way of that happening, and I also don't know if taxes is the right word for that monetary purpose, but is the demurrage, that if, you know, people are keeping way in excess surplus money in their checking accounts, their transaction accounts, their liquid accounts, you know, some threshold of some $1,000 above their typical monthly expenses over, you know, whatever year, 12 months, 24 months, it's average, you know, that's demurrage. That comes out. And is it demurrage, is it tax? I don't know what we call it, but I think that's in the territory that you're working with in this paper. And that was a little bit of feedback, but thanks, great work.
That's great feedback. Just very quick comments is that this was just a starting point, and I chose 4 examples in that chart. I had many more on a spreadsheet, different scenarios, and yeah. But you do point out some things. I am curious about what happens to, and when I said interest payments, I'm talking about federal payments on treasury bonds, and I don't know. Maybe Virginia might know, but what happens when the NEED Act kicks in, or something like that? What happens to that, to those interest payments? But I also kind of meant when we reach some kind of equilibrium state where we're in a purely just money situation, how will an economy work? That's what I wanted to look at. So, and the last thing you said is another question I have, and Joe has been awfully quiet, but something that he said way back that kind of stuck with me is that we don't want to use taxes to control inflation. And it's something that I think about. We'd rather just adjust the rate of money creation rather than trying to pull money out of people's pockets and causing them to spend less. I don't know the answer again, but it's something that people assume, well, we're just going to do that. That's a very MMT concept. And, or maybe we don't have to use taxation to quote unquote, cool the economy. I don't know. And I'm sure it may be a little of both, or maybe just whatever the policy is, whatever the monetary policy is. But my gut feel is that there's enough power in the money creation process, so that should be enough to control inflation. We probably don't need to use taxation.
Right, you're saying less would be created.
Yes.
And
yes.
the only point at which that's not sufficient is when
We're not making any money.
yeah, when you reach the point of zero,
right?
And there's still, people are doing, I think there's a whole territory of quality of life that will become non-monetized, non-commodified. We will, work our 12, that's where you get into
right
ideology, but no, we'll be able to read and make music together and have, weekly soup gatherings, in the park, whatever, soup and bread meals all together in the community for the fun of it.
What a
Not,
concept.
Post-pandemic. Anyhow, I'll be quiet, but so that would be the point where we don't need all of it. And, but yeah, that's pie in the sky.
I can't answer that question really, really quickly. All government debt has terms. So it's, and some of it is callable, which means that if it's a 30-year bond you're buying, they can say, we're going to pay you off.
Right.
We're done with it. Or very few anymore are non-callable, but it always annoyed me that Reagan in 1984 issued a non-callable bond at 14.5% for 30 years.
Deal.
I don't know who bought those, but that was a candy jar when interest dropped down into the 1 or 2% range, and they just finished paying that off. And it's Mike who is next on the stack.
Yeah, very well done, Paul. Very clear presentation. It definitely spells out kind of how the new system would function from just a sort of overview of logistical redirection of money. So that's very good. A few things I wanted to comment on was, if we were to eliminate taxes, it's the wealthy that pay most of taxes, and so they would benefit the most from tax reductions. And I do think that there's a good purpose for taxation as a control on wealth accumulation. And so I view taxes partially to function as a check on that. I mean, in the ideal system, at least. Of course, now that doesn't matter so much, and there's active efforts to, of course, we need to make efforts in society to reduce the tax burden on the wealthy, right? That's what gets focused on in our government. But anyhow, so again, about taxes, I think that if we pay for what we use, the taxes are kind of like an average of what everybody uses. Perhaps if the tax system was more directed and, you sort of pay a percentage of what you use, I've always wanted a receipt, or at least an ability to select where my taxes go. And I think if everybody had that option, there would be no more war. People would not be funding, deliberate destruction of other people for pillaging resources. It just wouldn't happen. So anyhow, I think there's a few things that we could do, to use taxes to help, benefit society in a reasonable way. So I think taxes do have a good purpose. They could be used for positive, if you had a government that was actually working for the people and not owned by the oligarchs.
Virginia, before we move on, usually we try at least to get some of new people reaction to this. So if Luciano or Mark Proper or Walter Wilson, who we haven't heard of from, or Terrell Jackson want to pitch in with a comment or a question, or with a one-word evaluation, go ahead.
This is Walter Wilson. Can you hear me?
Walter, go ahead.
I have been trying to follow the NEED Act since since our congressman from Ohio, blanked on his name, was no longer there.
Kucinich. Yeah, Kucinich.
Dennis Kucinich. Yeah, that's who I'm thinking of. But the idea of taxation and the introduction of new money, I think, has relevance from the standpoint that we need to find a way of getting the production of money in the hands of the Treasury rather than where it is right now via the banks. And it's the conversations here are interesting from the standpoint that it seems that a lot of us are, or at least in this discussion, are aware of a need for a better monetary system, but the real problem is convincing the powers that be to consider the issues surrounding just money. So that's basically my comment. From a political point of view, I can't hear.
Okay, we had a little interference, but can you hear us? We can hear you, I think. So,
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't know what the interference was.
Someone was calling in on an outside phone. It may have been you simultaneously. I don't know. And so it was getting feedback.
Oh, anyway, I'd like one of the things that I write into our politicians in DC, congressmen and senators alike, is to try to get them to consider the subject of monetary reform. And so I'll just end it right there. Thank you.
all right, thanks, Walter. Yes, indeed. Terrell.
All right.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
yeah, all right. So basically, I just appreciate like being here, learning more about this, and thank you for inviting me into your space tonight because I'm still learning about this. I'm very new to this conversation, and I don't know much about it. So I just enjoy listening in and seeing like where the conversation is heading and what are the ideas being thrown out there as a novice to this. So I hope to continue to come into the coffee houses and just to be in this space. Thank you all for allowing me to listen in tonight.
You're most welcome, and thanks for coming. Are you on our newsletter? Is that how you found out about this session, about this coffee house?
Yes.
Okay, then you're good. You're gonna get the study stack and further invitations for coffee houses. And the newsletter, of course, that's what you signed up for. Mark Proper, you still wanna get us a little feedback? And let us know if you got lost somewhere, if we got too technical maybe, or not technical enough, or not clear enough. If not, Luciano, same question.
No, it's clear. I understand everything.
Oh my God, wow.
You're ahead of us.
Sorry, you were talking to me, no? You said
Yes.
Luciano?
When you said you were understood everything, I said you're ahead of us then.
No, I understood. But well, I did some videos, not very professional like your conversation, but trying to test the knowledge of common persons, no? At the street, common, maybe not educated. And you know, everybody told me if it is really so easy, no, the trick, so why nobody change it, no? So I understand that you are professionals that no, you want to change no, the whole system, and you need this professionality, no? But sometimes to have more support for people, we need like the presentation, the first presentation, and easy words to get more people involved. And that's all. For that was my question. If you were all economists, because sometimes I read many books in economy, but sometimes common people don't understand what is, I don't know, some words, specific words, and it's difficult to get into the movement, no? So that is just a comment because I used to be alone many years. So I just trying to understand what people think. Science a banker, a rich person, or a poor person. So that was
Luciano, I got a
comment.
question. I got a question for you. You said you made something of a video?
Yes, there are some videos, but not professionals. I'm gonna be honest.
No,
With
that's
some
okay.
with
You
some
want to share
mistakes.
those?
Yes, I can share. I want to prevent that the second one. I try to explain the debt system, but I study a little of marketing as well. So because we are in a liquidity crisis, no, when gold or some money, there are some people that support some money, is going to be the first thing that people is going to put in the face, no, like the price of Bitcoin and all these things. So I try to do a video where you can show the debt system and to put both possibilities, no? Some money that is for me, well, is not the solution, and the possibility to have a central bank money, no, directory. So I know that there is two ways, no, but both ways are like fighting against banking, no, that commercial banking, no. And which was my goal. My goal is not to be like a perfect video, no. It's like to take to call the attention of the persons, no. So imagine this kind of video with my hand in my computer trying to explain, no, very easy.
Yes.
And then I put on Twitter and I put all the economists in my country from right to left, no, if they want to say something. Obviously nobody reply, but everybody knows about that video. And what I show in that video, the debt system, no, that we are living in a debt system and there's not enough money for everybody. That for me was the first step, no? And for that reason, many people think that I only want gold or Bitcoin. No, that's not my purpose. No, my goal. The first goal is to show the problem. No, well, it's not very professional, honestly. But well, then if the people talk about it, then you have the really professional people like you that you are studying science 10, 20 years ago, maybe, and you read all books, who can have an academic debate, no? Well, that's my idea, but maybe you can take some pieces of the video and do something more professional, obviously, no? If you like it, I can send it and you check it. but well, I don't know if you like it. But
Well,
honestly,
Luciano,
many persons saw this.
great,
Yes.
great. I propose we stay in contact and look at your videos. I'm part of the editors of the Democratizar El Dinero, together with Mark Young and Jesus Gerizola. And you know, we're looking for other people to connect with and exchange sources. So I'll find you. We'll get in contact, and I'll find you. Sounds interesting. Sounds good. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Thanks
It's
so
like
much.
marketing. It's like makes noise, and well, it's the way. No, that's all. Sorry for my comment. It's not very professional. Sorry.
No,
It's
we know
great.
what you mean.
Great.
All right, folks, it's 9:30. I don't know if anybody still has something on their chest that has to come out.
I have something, Gover.
Oh, Sue, of course, yes. Go ahead, Sue.
I just want to say I'm the chairperson of the membership and movement committee of the Alliance, and I'm hoping to reach out to people on this call. I hope you will respond to me, because I think we need all of your energy, and I'd like to offer some roles for you in the organization. That's number one. And number two, I just want to say to Govert and Bo Young and Mark Young about organizing the these coffee houses. I have personal experience with the person, I forget the academic you mentioned, Govert, for a future coffee house.
Oh, Richard Wolf. Yes.
Yes, I have personal experience with him. So just reach out to me and I can just tell you my personal experience. That's all.
Okay. Okay, anybody else still? Last words of wisdom?
I did have one comment I wanted to make, and that was
okay, Mark, go ahead.
The purpose of this whole position paper thing, and particularly the taxation argument that Paul put forth in his presentation, is that in monetary reform, it takes monetary theory, and because I think, as Paul indicated when he first started, is that doing monetary reform in a global free market system with all the different inputs and outputs has never been done before. And so what we try to do each other is push each other to think outside the box and not get trapped into our current way of thinking and what this current system has kind of shuffled our thinking into, and to think outside the box and to come up with monetary theory that can then be modeled and studied by actual economists who have economic models. And so while we may not agree on what taxation level is proper, or if you can eliminate or reduce taxation to a certain point, we do have to come up with problems that can be studied by people so that they can do a model and say, okay, well, let's model the United States and this amount of productivity with this amount of taxation if it's just for defense and some of the things that Lucille mentioned and nothing else. And we create all this money. What happens? Or model different things where there's half of that. But I think at least my goal is to always push the conversation and to get the guys involved that do have the economic modeling software, just like Yamaguchi modeled the NEED Act exactly as it was and said there was no inflation. But if I give him different inputs, what would that response be? So that's all I wanted.
Okay, yeah. And of course, we got Yamaguchi, we got these Dutch at the Financial Sustainability Lab, and we got Koomhoff with his model. But anyway, this is it. Folks, thank you so much. Again, I think this was a great coffee house, great discussion, great creativity. I hope we contributed something that we can share with the world in a organized way. But we're in a production process, and we're gonna get better and better. That's for sure. So I say farewell, good night, be all well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clover. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Grover. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
all.
See you
Good
next
night.
time.
No.